All right, and welcome again, everyone, to our West Palm Beach TCI talk. Again, normally we would be in West Palm Beach, but here we still have the opportunity to be together. This morning, we do our monthly TCI talks. Usually we alternate Dade, Broward, and quarterly we're in Palm Beach, but with virtual, we can be in all places at all times now. So today's program is brought to you by board member and top women Kirsten Dolan and Tony Gruebl, and it is on managing conflicting priorities during crisis. And Kirsten, I'm going to turn it over to you and to Tony. So thank you. You're up.
All right, thank you. I want to thank everybody, first of all, for jumping on this call. I know everybody's extremely busy. We've got a really exciting discussion going on to talk about managing conflicting priorities, especially during this really difficult time. I talk to a lot of people, and I also notice myself that we're working harder with fewer and fewer support staff and furloughs, and we're saddled with more administration. And as a result, there's conflicting priorities. So this is going to be a great discussion. We're going to come away with some really good tips. Tony's a great speaker. But before we get into that, I want to acknowledge Laura France, who's administering the polling and any questions from the group and the visuals for us today. I want to welcome and introduce our special guest, Tony Gruebl. We're very lucky to have Tony with us today. He's the founder of his own company, Think, which consults with businesses to transform on-the-ground operations and technology. His main office is in Baltimore, but he also has an office in Boca as well. He's co-authored 2 books, one called Bare Knuckle Project Management, and another one that's coming out in October that's called The Red Pill Executive. He's a 6 Sigma Master Black Belt, so he's an expert in process improvement and figuring out which activities are not creating value in an organization. Most importantly, he's a master of leadership, and he's going to show us the way forward today in this time of uncertainty. I welcome Tony and thank him for the time out of his busy schedule. And I want to start, Tony, at more of a macro level, and before we really dig into detail, and just ask you if you could describe what you're hearing and seeing in the market, and how are people reacting? Are you seeing panic? Are you seeing calm? Give us your perspective of what's going on and how it's changed since March.
Yeah, so Laurie, Kirsten, thanks for having me today. That's a pretty big buildup for a little guy in Baltimore. That's big shoes to fill. So I hope there's a couple of interesting things in this conversation today. So as I was sort of thinking through that question, a meeting that I had yesterday morning sort of occurred to me. I had a guy call me here in Baltimore who was a big, burly ex-firefighter, and he started a company 4 years ago to provide training for other mid-market companies in the Baltimore metropolitan area around defibrillators and what do you do with active shooting situations and that kind of thing. And he's doing really well. He's been doing really well for 4 years. And he called me last week and he said, "Hey, can we get together for coffee? I want to pick your brains." And I said, "Absolutely, let's get together." And so I met him for outdoor coffee yesterday morning, and I'm hearing about his company and how he's progressing. And I said, "Well, but how are you doing?" And he looks at me and he says, "I'm depressed." I was like, "That's interesting. I'm hearing a lot of that. I'm hearing a lot of people who are personally feeling unstable, sort of not with the current situation." And it started a conversation that I think sort of continues into this conversation. So what I wound up sharing with him is that he's got to change his frame. And his frame is right now is very today oriented, but he needs to change it to a more future oriented kind of thinking. And through that conversation, I think it helped me and it helped him understand that today is sort of temporary. Tomorrow, things are going to change again and things can be different. And so what I'm seeing in the marketplace, we work with about 25 different companies at any given time in the mid-market. So I'm working with a lot of mid-market executives in one way or another. We're either doing technology advisory or operations advisory, or we're running projects, or or finding the right people for their team. And those companies shake out into a couple of different categories. So there's the one kind of company that we all want to be, which is virtually unaffected by COVID. Since March, they just kept rolling forward, right? Unaffected companies. And on the opposite side of that extreme, there's restaurants, cruise companies, hospitality, airlines devastated by COVID. In the middle, there's some degree of companies that are affected one way or another. They're either experiencing lost deals. I mean, who here hasn't experienced a lost deal over the last 5 months? I know as soon as COVID hit, within the first 2 weeks, I lost two executive advisory projects that we were going to work on just because the companies needed to catch the breath. They needed to reorient, figure out what they were going to do going forward. And it took them a while to come back around to us. And surprisingly, not surprisingly, those two companies were in education. So to one degree or another, folks in the middle have had varying degrees of lost business. But the thing about that is, initially there was sort of a 6-week period where there was a shock, and we all looked and said, how stable is our business? After that, I think many folks, if they weren't fighting close down crisis, they were starting to view COVID as what I think of as a crucible event or a black swan event. And when you encounter one of those events, it can either take you out at the knees as an individual or a company, or you can get harder. You can get forged by it, become a better operator in the marketplace. So generally, I'm sort of seeing that spectrum. Companies in that spectrum are shifting; they're moving through it, and I think that's typically what we're all encountering out there.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you said that, because I'm kind of in that category with that fireman that you were referring to, and getting depressed. So I think that reframing is a great suggestion. I appreciate that, and I need to do that myself. What are some of the ways that you are helping keep busy executives focused on high value activities? So working on the things that matter and get results as opposed to everything else.
Well, and this is the key thing. The question, when I hear that kind of question, what I have to come back with is, what do you consider to be high value, and how do you determine high value, right? There's frameworks that exist for this. A lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners tend to run by the seat of their pants. High value is maybe the thing that gets us through the next day or the next week. What I'm trying to encourage our clients to do is look at their NorthStar. Determine if they have a vision going forward that's beyond even this year. Because what high value means depends on what that NorthStar is a year from now. And when I was talking to Scott yesterday morning, I asked him what his NorthStar was. And I don't know that he had one. I think that he was focused on surviving the moment. But I gotta tell you, if you're here, if you're in this meeting, if you're in a company and it's made it 5 months into COVID, you're surviving. You've already done the things that allow you to get through this kind of situation. It's not easy for many people. And I certainly don't want to minimize that. But if you're here and you're operating, you're surviving. And I encourage folks, especially if, like, even in my business, I wake up occasionally and I don't jump out of bed when I think I have to face COVID today, right? But I do jump out of bed every day when I go, what is Think going to be in 12 months? What is Think going to be in 3 years? What are the big ideas that we aspire to have our team work to for the future? And when I'm in that moment, COVID is just a momentary blip. And so high value to me are the things that need to get done to get us there in the future, 3 years out. We are surviving today and we'll be fine. We need to get that bigger vision accomplished, because honestly, that's what pulls us through. high value is what you define as executives as well. So you have to define that as leaders in your companies. You have to think about that long-term vision, and the things that are high value to you should be the things that get you there. And the things that are not high value to get you there, they're either survival or you're just doing them out of habit. And I argue that things that we're just doing out of habit, we ought to stop doing. We ought to only do the things that point us to our North Star. And for our executive advisory team, that's worked well for our clients. Does that sort of shape that a little bit for you, Kirsten?
No, it does. And I think when this first started, we all kind of, or at least I thought, okay, this is around an 8-week problem that's going to go away. And so your perspective was, okay, it is temporary. And then as it started to drag on, you're right, you get buried in the mire of what's going on. And it's really difficult to look for that North Star, as you say, because you don't see the end. And
Right.
initially when this started, you felt like this really wasn't going to last that long. That feeling started to go away over time. So I think that's great advice and kind of puts things back into perspective again.
Yeah, and that's a personal thing as well as a company thing, right? I mean, there's a lot of individuals here on the call that don't own companies. So they're not thinking, where am I going as a company? But from a personal perspective, I like to think, what's your North Star personally? Like, who do you want to be in 12 months? We're in a crucible moment. We're in a moment that shapes people by fire. And you can take advantage of that and harness it. Some people the fires are greater. Other people, the fires are not as great. But it's still one of those moments that it's going to change me. It's going to change you. It's going to change our businesses. It's going to change the way the economy functions in some way, in a persistent way in the future. So, now is a great time to go, who am I going to be next year or in 3 years? Or what is my company going to be now or in 3 years?
Oh, that's great. In your book, Bare Knuckle Project Management, there's a section where you talk about conflict. And even though that conflict, it focuses a little bit more on conflict with individuals, I think it's relevant in the discussion because tensions are very high. People are very frustrated. And it creates inevitably an environment where there's more conflict. Can you give us a quick lesson on how best to deal with these type of interpersonal conflicts that occur?
Yeah, so in Bare Knuckle Project Management, we deal with this a little bit. That book was written to project managers who need to operate to the guidance of a COO or a CEO, and so not all project managers sort of operate that way. And in the book, we have this really simple construct called the Eisenhower Grid. Is that it? Yeah, there's the Eisenhower Grid. Really, really simple thing that grids out what's most important, what's most urgent, and you can find compromise when you sort of assess your position and your relative, and the person on the other side of that assess their position. But oh my God, this is very cerebral stuff, right? And the book was written 5 years ago, and I've sort of said, well, I've grown a little bit. Like, what's the real key to conflict resolution? And I'll just tell you, I think the key is empathy. Once you begin to empathize with your opponent in a conflict, you can begin to see what's most important to them. And sometimes it turns out that what's most important to them is within your power to give them, and what's most important to you is within their power to give you. And you can find a way through conflict that way. So interpersonal conflict, there's a lot of material on how to do that. There's a lot of psychology around that. As an operator, you can use a standard matrix to sort of work your way through. A little too cerebral for me. What I try to do is just understand why the conflict is happening, empathize with what that person wants on the other side of the table, and that empathy allows me to see the world through their eyes and offer ways to get through conflict.
No, that's interesting. One of the things I've noticed initially when this first started was some of our clients, they were very on edge. They were worried about their own security. And so there were some conflicts that occurred just because of the nature of what was going on. And as it's gone on, some of those people have been a little bit more harder to get a hold of. Our clients are not as visible as they used to be, even though you'd think virtually it'd be easier to connect.
Mhm.
I think because of some of those initial conflicts and, decisions of trying what they should do, it created a situation where now it's almost like there's a wedge, if you will. And it's not necessarily because there was a fight, but the conflict of what was going on created a situation where, people just aren't as available. And do you have any thoughts on that, or have you seen that?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So, I mean, just like us, in a crisis, in a crucible moment, we tend to focus inwardly on the things that are causing us the most pain, right? So our clients are doing the same thing. They're dealing with the fires that they have right before them, and they're depressed, just like 90% of the rest of us are around this COVID thing, and they're under a tremendous amount of pressure. Some of them don't know what their futures are going to look like. So if we empathize with that, what I'm finding is, in order to re-engage with them, I need to develop a hopeful, empathetic message related to me and them, right? With clients that are grasping for something beyond the here and now, if I can craft that for them, they'll talk to me. And I've found that thinking about NorthStars, thinking about things like strategic alignment for my clients that are long-term, that are beyond COVID, talking to them about the crucible that they're in and how they use that crucible to shape themselves for the future and become more resilient to future shock, that's sort of a hopeful thing. And they'll engage with me on that, right? So I think for each of us, the challenge is for how I interact with you, what is my hopeful message? What's my beyond COVID message that I can actually affect in your life that allows you to have one moment of hopefulness and pull your head up and go, okay, I want some of that. When, as a services business, when my customers say to me, I want some of that, then I know I have a relationship that I can work with. And the conversation starts naturally.
Oh, that's great. I wrote that down. Hopeful, empathetic message, because I think that's key. So thank you. That's great. We all have a lot of things coming at us on a daily basis, and at some point everything starts to seem urgent. What is your starting point when there are conflicting priorities, and where do you sort through it and begin?
So here's where it gets a little bit, this is where we need to use some tools, right? Urgency creates more efficient triage. That's just sort of a natural thing, right? We can only do so much with what we have around us, and we only have so much time to get it done. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. When you add the concept of high value activities to that, and the notion of a North Star, and then aligning what we have to get done to our North Star vision for who we are or what we're doing, it allows us to sort of shake out the kinds of things that we should be focusing our time on, right? And so the frameworks that we use for that, if you think from an enterprise perspective, evaluation frameworks are like people, process, technology frameworks, right? How are the things that we're doing from an outcome perspective being shaped by the people, the process, and technology, and do they lead to the North Star? If you can draw back from your business, from the day-to-day of your business, and assess the business from a people, process, technology perspective against the North Star, that's a really strong framework for narrowing down what you should be doing today, tomorrow, next week, next year. I mean, there's always priorities, right? We always have to make cash flow work because we have to pay people, right? There's always that kind of stuff that gets in the way of that, in the way of that big thinking, or supports that big thinking, or just as a part of what we call the whirlwind of the big thinking. But if you step back and you take a moment to design that North Star and and make sure that people, process, and technology are focused towards it. And then you begin to drive down in your business things that cost you time and money that don't align to that. You can become even more efficient in your execution. You don't need urgency and crisis to create more efficient triage. You can sort of do it naturally. Do you want to talk more, like, do you want to dive into one or more elements of that, Kirsten?
Well, I guess, are you saying work backwards, figure out the NorthStar, and then take these three categories and go from there? So reverse engineer it.
You got to, right? You have to do that. Otherwise, what do you swim into, right? The daily whirlwind can take you in all kinds of different directions. And your team, you have a lot of employees, right? And you want them all swimming in the right direction towards a common vision of what one parking is going to be in 24, 36 months, 5 years. So to design that, to be intentional about that design. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be 100%. It just needs to be directionally sound. If you can get people swimming in the right direction, that NorthStar will evolve itself. I mean, Laura and I work on NorthStar all the time and think, where do we want to be in 3 years? What do we want to pull off? What does what we're doing today support what we're going to be doing then? What are the things that we're doing today that don't support that? Let's retire that kind of work. It's really about creating that vision. I got to tell you, when I sat down a few years ago to create a vision for Think, it took us from where we are, a management consulting firm that was more general, to an operations and technology executive advisory firm. And I intentionally designed that organization to that vision. We started to grow like crazy. We grew at 70% last year. And despite COVID, we're up 50% this year. So I know that I recognize that I'm on the positive side of that spectrum. But it wasn't because of luck. It was because I already had a tremendous amount of momentum towards my North Star. And having that momentum pulled us through 5 months of customers that were in crisis. And that was a great thing for us. I don't know that every company can do it that way, but I do know that when you design where you're going, you tend to get there in one way or another.
No, I like that. I like, people, process, and tech. I've never really thought of it that way. I think we do a good job on a couple of those, but it's a three-legged stool and we need to do all of them. So I think that's great, and being very intentional about the design. I like that phrasing.
There are frameworks out there for this. So the people, process, technology assessment framework is a pretty common thing. If you look that up on people, process, technology consulting for information technology consulting, generally it'll spit out a framework for how to self-assess your organization. And what Think does is we help organizations do that if they can't take that sort of objective arm's length approach to themselves. We'll come in and help them take that approach. And that's been amazing to watch it happen for our customers.
No, that's great. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. Some experts say to have an optimistic vision, but be pessimistic in how you handle your business model. So basically, I think what it's saying is stay positive, have confidence in yourself, but don't be overly optimistic with projecting numbers and planning and resources. Do you have any thoughts on that philosophy?
I mean, now's a great time for that question, right? To really get to the heart of that. Yeah, going back to this whole sort of COVID Black Swan event, who saw this coming? Yeah. Right? Who figured that this was right around the corner? I mean, I don't know about you all, but I walked into 2020 going, oh my God, this is going to be the best year ever, right? Like that little kid from The Incredibles. And then March 15th hit and Maryland shut down, right? And New York was shutting down. And so that crucible, that Black Swan event makes you really look at what makes your business tick. There's no room for kidding yourself. No one here in this meeting has any room for kidding themselves right now, right? Everything is going to get tighter, more efficient in the marketplaces that we operate in going forward. The slack is being driven out of our processes. There's no room for that. So is it optimistic or is it just forced realism, right? It's like, Kirsten, here's your business. You know, whether you like it or not, this is what you are. This is what you've built to this point. That is a very, that's a sort of a harsh reality that we all have to come to. But on the flip side of that, the optimistic part of this is to take that realism, that heavy dose of realism, and go, how am I going to design our organization based on the forging that we just went through to be stronger in the future? You can't predict black swans, right? That's the notion of black swans. If anybody hasn't read Black Swan, there's a book out by Nicholas Taleb. It's called The Black Swan. It's a really good book related to the unexpected events that can happen and how they shape things. But this is a moment where you can look back and go, okay, we were really good here. We weren't so good here. How do I take those lessons learned and now apply them in the future, my business? And that will drive slack out of your business, drive out inefficiency, and force you to be a more efficient operator in the future markets. Look, let's face it, the world is not going to be the same in one way or another after this. I like to think that humans, we still like to socialize a lot. So over time, we'll all start getting back together. But look at what technology has just done for us. This whole idea of Zoom means that really we don't need as much real estate as we thought we had. And that changes industry by industry, of course, but there's a trickle-down effect that happens economy-wide as a part of that. How are we reacting to that, right? How is your company reacting to it? I know how I'm reacting to it. I'm thinking, I do like that office in Boca, but do I really need it? Now, I'm going to keep the office in Boca, even though I had to shut it down 15 days after opening it up.
Yeah.
But you know, there are things that we can learn from this that will take us into the future. Does that sort of answer that question or help?
Yes, it does. And you know, you talk a lot about Slack and being lean and how it's just naturally happening, but there's a lot of initialisms in the world of goal setting and trying to figure all this out. We have KPIs, key performance indicators. We've got OKRs, which are objectives and key results, and 4DX, which is 4 disciplines of execution. Should we be embracing one of these alignment tools? And if so, how does it help me right now, right away today?
That's a great question. So, like as a preface to that, the other thing that we have to think about is the intersection of where technology and operations and change happens. Technology, operations, and people, right? When you change your organization, when you initiate some kind of project or program that moves you into that NorthStar direction, that intersection point is where your culture is most demonstrated in your business. Right? This is what we found as operators. And this is what my second book is about, Red Pill Executive. As executives of companies, we say, and I'm going to get to these methods of 4DX and that, but as executives, we say our company has a certain culture. We're a very distributed, highly professional organization of independent thinkers and that kind of thing, right? But you don't really see the signs of culture in a real way until you get to the intersection of people, process, technology, and change in a project. You see what companies reward. You see the invisible framework of rewards and non-rewards in that moment. And the reason I bring that up is because when we talk about things like 4DX or OKRs or KPIs, a lot about using those things is heavily culturally dependent. So many companies don't see their true culture until they try to use those tools. And that's an interesting thing too, because if you embrace, I like OKRs. Think has embraced OKRs. Objectives and key results. It comes from a book called Measure What Matters. Measure What Matters was written a number of years ago, 25 years ago. There it is, by John Doerr. It's a great book. It parallels KPIs and 4DX. 4DX is another great book. What I love about this is that these different tools are very similar, but they lock into different kinds of cultures. And so sometimes you have to try a couple of them to see what works and what doesn't work. Okay, so should we be using these? The answer to that is where it depends on where you are from a maturity perspective in your business. Am I an entrepreneur who's still running by the seat of my pants? Am I starting to really think out the next couple of years of operations and growth? Do I have a NorthStar? Am I learning how to align my operations, everything that people and process and technology do to that NorthStar, right? And then how do I measure it? How do I measure that I'm actually achieving it? So to pick up Measure What Matters, you can read it and you can look at it and you go, I want to do this, but if you haven't done those other things, it becomes much harder to do this. Or you read this book and you go, I want to do this, I guess I need a NorthStar in order to do it. I need to know what my big objective is, right? Who am I going to be in 3 years? Start with why. Why am I doing what I do? When you know that, then you can go, okay, John and Sally and Brenda, you need to do activities that get us there. I need you to define what objectives support those objectives, the big objectives, and how you get there is what we call the key results. And key results are things that I lay down and I go, okay, in a quarter, did you accomplish key results that directionally send us to our objective? So now we have this idea of aligning the entire organization to a mission, to a big idea, to a set of who we're going to be in the future. And that's what KPIs and OKRs and 4DX are designed to do. If you don't know the bigger context of this, you'll have to learn it as part of embracing it. What I would encourage, if you're a business owner or an executive of a business, take a piece of your time and pick one up, right? Pick up Doer's book or 4DX and just read it as part of your reading stack and see what you think about the idea. And then if it appeals to you, talk about it with your senior executive team. Let them read the book. Ask them what they think about its match to your organization, and if we can start to do that. And maybe the next step is, well, you know, we have an annual strategic planning meeting. Why don't we accelerate that? Let's start thinking about our strategic planning meeting as a NorthStar development meeting, right? Where are we going to be, and how do we start to align ourselves around that, right? And then when we have that sort of NorthStar defined, which can take time, let's start to try to use OKRs or 4DX or whatever. And now let's design ways to measure that. What you'll find, like many of my clients have found, and what we found ourselves, it takes time to get good at this. And I will tell you, we're still not good at this. We still struggle with how to drive our OKRs deeper into our organization. Our clients struggle with that too. I can't tell you the amount of times that our clients have written terrible objectives for their business, and they just break all the rules of OKRs. And they're like, no, Jim, we're just going to start here. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, just start there. It's okay, because it's a learning experience. The more you use them, the more clarity you get in terms of your vision for your company.
Earlier on, you said that there was an intersection of these things with the culture. Are you suggesting that if you don't have the right culture, you can have all these other things in place and you still may not be able to get there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the problem that Think fixes, right? So, and that's the subject of the book, right? That's the whole business of consulting right there.
Okay.
To one way or another, most of us are misaligned, right? We miswrite our NorthStar, we misdefine our objectives, we misdefine our key results. It's not about a perfect A on this stuff. It's about an incremental progress to better, right? And so the journey is not get perfect. The journey is get better than I was yesterday, right? Okay, so culture is really important here because it's largely ignored. It's a, you know, it's a great, CEOs get together and they talk about the culture of their business and they yuck it up and that's cool. And, you know, or they define what their culture is going to be and the organization is or isn't that culture. Culture is what it is, right? You've spent or you are part of a team that has been developing for years. Someone defined the kind of team that they wanted to build in our companies, and they've spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, finding those people and hiring them into your organization, cultivating them, aligning with them, and moving the organization forward. And so we have a client, I'll give you an example, a big government organization. It's a smaller part of an organization. It's got 500 employees. And they've spent the last 10 years hiring scientists into this organization. And the people who hired those scientists have a certain way of thinking. And so they've hired people, 500 people into their organization that think that way. And for years, that was a great model for them, right? Everybody thought the same way. The organization accomplished what it was supposed to accomplish. And then things shifted. And they said, well, we want to be more agile. We want our scientists to be less like who they are and more like who we want them to be. And we were like, okay, we see how you might want to do that to react to the marketplace. How are you going about it? And the answer wasn't, we're now starting to hire people with that new attitude, that new way of thinking to replace the people who don't have that way of thinking. The approach that they had was, well, we're just going to tell them how they need to do it differently. But they couldn't get it done. They couldn't make the shift. The leadership and the team resisted the exact thing that they wanted to do. And they didn't recognize it, right? So we do an assessment that really clearly shows them they can't do what they want to do without a tremendous amount of pain and effort. More pain and effort that they wanted to go through in order to make that shift just because of who they were. So they need a better strategy that aligns to who if they don't want to change the organization completely, they need a strategy that maps into their existing culture. And you can develop that. The problem with that executive team was they could not see that they built a culture that would not allow them to be a different culture, right? So, and they're stuck in it because they're part of that culture as well. So this is why an honest, realistic view of what your culture really is the best place to start with, what do I want to adopt? If you're an organization that thrives in the crazy, you do a million things, right? You thrive in the crazy. Everybody's pants are on fire 100% of the time, right? If you're that kind of business, do OKRs really work for you? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, you don't want a million OKRs, a million things that you're trying to achieve. It's too diverse. You want a few things that everybody can rally around. So maybe that's not the best method. But 4DX has a method that has a framework that includes something called the whirlwind. The whirlwind is all those your pants are on fire kind of things. And then it asks you every once in a while, deliberately and intentionally step above that and think about the three things that are most important. What are your moon shots? What are your roof shots? And what are the things you just got to get done? That's 4DX. It's a really cool methodology, but it might map to that company that is more crazy, more hair on fire all the time, right? OKRs maps to a little bit different company. KPIs maps to a little bit different kind of company where key performance indicators, more financial kinds of things are more important. So my advice is sample the universe. Take a little taste of this, take a little taste of that. If you want to see what your culture really looks like, look at your projects, at your organization change projects, because you see the conflict between culture, who you are and what do you want to become right there at that intersection point. right? That's a great place to assess it. And with that in mind, then you can start to design which one of these tools is best for you.
That's great. I learned a lot from this because we normally look at KPIs, which I don't think after your explanation is probably the right thing for our organization. I'm really interested in this 4DX because your description of being on fire and, you know, not being able to necessarily focus on 20 different initiatives is exactly our organization. So I learned a lot from that, and I'm definitely going to look into more about the 4DX. If you had to tell us something that your clients or the people on this call don't want to hear, but they need to hear, what is that? What would that be?
I think if I'm evangelizing right now in this moment with COVID, I think you all have heard it to some extent, and that is, I get that you have to focus on today, but you got to extract yourself out of today, and you have to think about the future for just some period of your life, some part of your day. You have to think about where you personally and as an organization are going to be in the future. It's not that it's difficult. I mean, I guess it is difficult to do, especially if you're in crisis. But you know, that whole being in crisis loop where it's just crisis and inability to overcome it and feeling like you're not in a place where you have any control over what's happening to you. That is a loop that's very difficult to break. So if I'm able to help my clients, I want to break that loop, right? I just want to extract them just for a momentary, bit of time, allow them to see a more hopeful view of the future in a way that they can take back into their daily whirlwind. You know what, this isn't my life. This is only my life today. This is only my life through December, until the darn election's over, or until we have a cure, we have a inoculation for COVID, which I'm going to get 3 shots, by the way, for that, because I want that bad. Once that happens, things change again. That time will come. You can survive, but just don't lose heart. Don't lose hope. That's the thing that I'm trying to tell my clients. Do I want to tell them that they're doing stuff wrong? We all do stuff wrong. It's a matter of degrees, and it's a matter of incremental progress. So I'm more of an incremental progress guy. My wrong is your, way forward. So it's just, it all depends on your circumstances.
Well, you've certainly, been successful today extracting me and making, getting me out of the day-to-day activity trap, crisis trap. So, in less than 45 minutes, you've been able to do that for me. So I appreciate it.
Thanks.
One final question that I have for you is, can you leave us, before we go to questions, can you leave us with one word or thought that you'd like to leave us with as we navigate this uncertainty?
Yeah, you're being forged. I'm being forged, right, into something better. Right? Everything around us is pressuring us to be better at what we do. I think that's a really cool thing, right? I know that on this call, some folks are under way more stress than other folks are under. But whatever stress that we're under, it's a forging moment for us, and we can take that forward in our lives. That's what I'd love to leave y'all with.
Okay, that's perfect. I appreciate it. Do we have any questions before we wrap up?
Kirsten, I just have one for Tony. And Tony, the NorthStar, I love that concept. And does your book spend a lot of time on NorthStar? And if not, what book? I'm a big book person, and we actually have a program called Big Ideas Beyond the Book. What book would you recommend? I mean, I know we did Designing Your Life. we read that one a couple years. It's great. Okay, so that's one to go back to, especially now, because when we read it, we weren't going through any of this.
Right, right. And you know, that's interesting because like I love Simon Sinek. If anybody hasn't seen the 17-minute TED talk that got him started, I watched that thing over and over again. And I was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. What I didn't realize was that he was on to NorthStar. You know, to know who you are and why you do something, that's sort of your North Star, and I think that's a cool thing. My current book, I don't really, do I talk about North Star? I think that's going to be my next book. No, the current book is really about the intersection of people, process, technology, and change, and culture, and how to understand culture, and how important that is with operations, because most operators don't get the notion of culture. But with operators, COOs, VPs of operations, and operating teams, they can be undermined or they can be highly successful based on whether they use culture properly or not, and whether they see it. So that's that book. No, I haven't really, I learned about NorthStar through our consulting practice. We hire retired CIOs and CTOs. I'm not a retired, but I'm a COO. But those guys and ladies, they brought this idea of NorthStar people, process, and technology assessment into my life a number of years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is another missing link. If you want to help a mid-market company, show them how to figure out what their NorthStar is and then align to the NorthStar. That's a transformative thing. So I had to learn about that through experience. I didn't really pick that up through books.
No, I love that. But it's not only because it makes you think not only for your company, but for you personally, you know, an individual.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was transformative for me as well.
Hey, Tony, I have a question. This is Zach from One Parking.
Yeah.
How do you align to your North Star when you work in an industry that some would consider, I wouldn't say not exciting, but a little bit more like, well, we're in the parking industry. You know, we can only get so exciting and creative with some of our details. How do we focus on the why and in the North Star when, you know, other than just looking at profitability? Yeah,
so that's a really good question. I think that in every industry there's exciting things, and we're in such a period of technological change. Parking might not be the place that you experience cutting edge business driving technical change at that, you know, read about it in Business Week kind of way. But Zach, wouldn't it be cool if you could use technology to transform the parking industry, right? Wouldn't it be cool if you could get out ahead of everybody else, do things better, more effectively, more efficiently than any competitor in your space, and then be able to go to a client. Maybe you have clients that are harsh or hard to deal with, right? And be able to show them something where their eyes light up, where the industry that is, you know, hey, we just park, right? The industry that on its surface could look not very exciting could, for the customer that you serve, be everything about what they do all day long and light their eyes up, right? That, I think that there's like opportunities in every industry for that kind of thing, that you can get beyond the mundane of what you do and get to a point where you affect people and their companies in a significant and real way. That's cool to me. It doesn't matter what industry you're really in. If you can help the person on the other side of the Zoom meeting or the table or in the coffee shop, and you can pull them out of their mundane and unlock their hopefulness in what they do, boy, you get a customer for life when that happens. I'll just tell you that from experience.
So what I'm hearing you say, Tony, is, you know, these people that are parking at our facilities, they've got an end goal behind them. You know, they're going to work, they're going out, you know, to have a good time with their friends and family. Maybe understand what their end goal is, and you know, go towards that experience and make sure that they don't have issues in the parking facility. Make sure that they know that they're welcome there and that they want, to park with us versus, someone else.
Now that has to be aligned with your overall organizational vision, right? Like if your organizational vision is to serve clients who serve parkers, then maybe you have to shift that a little bit. Maybe your enticement for your customer is, we have solutions that make your customers more happy. And that's our North Star. We want to make your customers more happy so that you're more happy in what you do. I think that's that whole alignment piece. What does Kirsten want to do with the business? Where is One Parking going in the future? And how does everybody in the organization get behind that vision, lock into it, and develop key results that add to that overall idea? That's where you want to try to get to as an organization. I think that's the direction.
That's great. I really appreciate it, Tony. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else?
Now we've got Tony. Please don't be shy. Jump on in and ask Tony a question. We've got a few minutes left here, so let's take advantage of our time together. And or if anyone has an anecdote of their own to share, right, Tony and Kirsten?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we had some poll questions we were going to throw up along the way. I don't know that we got to them, but I'm just curious. I mean, how many folks have thought in their businesses about NorthStar or strategic alignment or using like these tools, OKRs, in order to get things done? Is that something you're coming to, or is it something you're already there with? Like, anybody currently using OKRs or 40X or something similar? Okay, well, there's a few. Yeah, there's a few.
You'll see just at the end of this session, we'll launch one of our little polls that is a KPI for us on how we're doing with our programming. But we're actually going to be reading Measure What Matters as TCI, in particular, to better understand all of us collectively,
that's
not
great.
Just me.
Yeah,
and we'll be discussing Measure What Matters, and I was excited to see that was one of your choices of books too.
You're gonna like that book. It's sort of eye-opening. And I saw that Laura put up, we have Red Pill Executive coming out in October. If you're interested in that book, which is again about the intersection of culture and change and people and technology, if you register online for it, we will send you a pre-copy of the book. As soon as we get it out, we'll send you a version of it. So feel free to sign up for that. Well, look, I want to thank everybody for letting me take their morning up and have a few minutes to evangelize. This is always fun for me. I hope there was a nugget that you're able to take into your day as a result.
Absolutely.
Right. And go ahead, Kirsten, before we'll have Jess calls us up. Go ahead.
First, Lori Kay and Jessica, thank you so much for giving us this platform to provide this information and exchange ideas. Laura and Tony, thank you for today's discussion and being a resource to the Commonwealth Institute community today. It's been fascinating to speak with someone that really gets the inner workings of how to make a company better. So we've taken away some great insights, and I just want to thank everybody on the call and everybody that participated.
Great. Thank you so much, Tony, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Again, there are a lot of pluses in the fact that we can't be together virtually, because geographically we can invite people from all over the country to join us. So we're thrilled. We thank you for guiding us, helping us. We're learning more together, advancing us all together. And I thank everybody for starting their morning with us. And thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day and happy Wednesday. We're halfway through the week.
Thank you.
Go find your North Stars. Bye, everyone.